I'm a night shift nurse for more than 10 years now. You were told that you get used to the quiet. They are wrong. Night hospitals are not quiet. They are. They creak, whine, and hiss as if someone is always present. But nothing could have readied me for what happened on my last night at Mercy General. It was a raw Thursday night in October. The kind of night when thunder rattles your very marrow and even patients are nervous. I was on duty in the East Wing, which consisted mostly of geriatrics and long-term coma patients. The rest of the wing had been shut down for renovation, so there was just me, 2 other nurses, and about 6 patients. It was around 2:00 a.m. I was doing my rounds as usual. All the patients were resting machines, blinking on and off in gentle light. Room 209 had Mr. Harold Finch, an 82-year-old man in a coma due to a stroke. He'd been like that for almost a year. No brain activity, no movement, nothing. But that night when I passed by his room, I swear on my life, he was standing by the window. I froze. He was just standing there with his back to me, looking out into the rain. My heart jumped up into my throat. I snuck in softly, speaking softly, "Mr. Finch?" He wasn't saying a word. Then he turned towards me. His eyes were wide open, but not the eyes of someone who had just awakened. They were blank, as though something else occupied them now. His lips moved, but what he was saying was gibberish. I crept in and heard him repeat something repeatedly. "Don't let her in, don't let her in, don't let her in." And he collapsed. I called code blue, but the monitors never did drop. No alarms, no hemispheres. He was still in a coma. When the doctors came, they checked everything. No vitals have been changed. They wrote it off as a stress hallucination mine. But I've seen what I've seen. That man stood up, talked, and made a warning. After that, things started to go wrong. Room 213 used to be an operating room when they converted it into storage. The door used to open by itself. I'd go by and catch it slightly ajar. I'd shut it all the way up, and 5 minutes later, the creaking door opened again. The first few times I thought it was the draft from the storm, but then the lights would flicker only in that hallway, and the temperature dropped, noticeably. I could see my breath. At 3:13 a.m., there was a call light from room 207 starting to flash. That room was unoccupied. Thinking it was a system glitch, I went in to check. As I entered the room, I sensed it immediately, that jolt of electricity down your skin, the one that makes you realize something is dreadfully wrong. I turned on the light. There was a girl lying on the bed. She was about 9 years old and had on a hospital gown that was far too large. She had very black hair that framed most of her face. I stood there frozen, trying to get my head around what I was witnessing. "Sweetheart, do you have any idea where you are?" She slowly turned her face to me. Her eyes were hollow, black, not empty, but full, like an empty space staring back. She opened her lips and whispered, "He told you not to let me in." The lights flashed and went out. The door slammed shut behind me. I swear I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I could hear her coming even though I couldn't see anything. Her breath was freezing cold against my face. And then just as quick, the lights sprang back on. She was gone. The bed was still, dusty, like no one had been in years. I ran out of the room and nearly collided with Anna, one of the other nurses. She looked at me and said, "Why did you speak to yourself?" I told her what had occurred, but of course she didn't believe me. "You've been working too hard," she told me. "You need some coffee." I didn't manage to grab a cup of coffee, but even in the break room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me in. The air was heavy. I kept catching movement out of the corner of my eye. By 4:00 a.m., I was once more taking vitals. When I entered Mr. Finch's room, I noticed that the monitors had been turned off. That was not supposed to happen. I hadn't signed out. I proceeded to turn them back on and saw scratches on the inside of the window. For deep, long scratches across the glass. From the inside, my hands were trembling. I stepped back and knocked over the force stand. When I saw my feet, there were tiny wet footprints on the ground, child-size. They ran from the bed to the door and out into the hallway. I couldn't take any more of it. I ran down to the security office and begged them to show me the hallway tapes. They were stubborn at first, but I must have looked so sad enough to convince them. We rewound the tape to somewhere around 3:15 a.m., and there she was, as plain as day. That very same little girl in the white dress running barefoot down the corridor, water dripping from her hair flowing behind her like seaweed. She even glanced up at the camera once and smiled. The feed cut out for a second and went black. Then it came on again. No sign of her. I resigned that night, and I never returned to Mercy General. I submitted my resignation the following morning. No questions asked. No explanations. I just couldn't do it. Later I did some digging. Well, it seems that back in 1998, there was a young lady named Lila Freeman who drowned in a hospital tub in the same wing. Her parents were suing the hospital for negligence, and Mercy General resolved the case amicably. They shut down that part of the wing shortly thereafter. Room 213, it used to be hers. I still dream about her sometimes. She is always standing next to a hospital bed, saying something to someone in the dark. I think she wasn't aiming to hurt me. I think she was trying to warn me, but it was too late already. Hospitals never scared me. I always thought of them as healing places, not sites of terror. But all of that changed the summer I worked night shifts as a temp orderly at Hartford St. Vincent's Medical Center. It was 2019, and I was in need of money for college. I thought night shifts would be slower. I thought wrong. There was a forgotten wing of the hospital that wasn't used anymore, the North Wing, 5th floor. It had been shut down due to a fire a decade prior, yet a part of it still existed in a state of quasi-activity. Every now and then, when beds in the primary wards were taken, the night supervisor would send patients upstairs. And so, I found myself conducting routine inspections of what we all called the cold room. It was room 509. Everyone avoided it if they could. Staff whispered about strange things, equipment, failing patients, screaming, and one nurse who quit mid-shift, never returning to the hospital. I thought it was just exaggerated gossip to freak out the new guy, but what I saw in 509 still haunts me. Mid-July evening around 2:30 a.m. the nurse station phone rang. One of the patients had been moved to room 509 since the ICU was overcrowded. He was stable, but needed to be watched. My job was to stay with him for a few hours, check the vitals, and lend a hand if needed. Piece of cake until I got there. As soon as the doors of the elevator opened on the 5th floor, it was cold. I'm sure it was no less than 15 degrees cooler than the rest of the building. The hallway lights flickered overhead, causing stuttering long shadows. I approached room 509, the wheels of my med cart creaking louder than ever before in the quiet. The name of the patient was Michael Rivera. Middle 40s, having just recovered from a terrible asthma attack. I discovered him sleeping hooked up to the monitors. Everything was normal in the readings, except the room seemed off. The air was thick, difficult to breathe, like something insubstantial was pressing up against my chest. I sat beside his bed and looked at the chart. Everything stable. I pulled out my phone, planning to surf some vids to stay alert. But there was no signal. That was odd, because signal was fine everywhere else in the hospital. My phone displayed 3:03 a.m., and then the monitor beeped. Not an alarm, just one blaring beep. I looked up. Michael was still asleep, but the heart monitor flattened for a moment, then returned as if nothing was wrong. I blinked, slouched forward, and checked the leads. Tape down. Then I heard the whisper. Right behind me. He doesn't belong here. I turned around. The room was empty. I stood up, my heart pounding, and looked into the hallway. No one. The floor was empty, lights still flashing. I attributed it lack of sleep, my imagination, maybe even some joke being pulled on me. I sat down once more. 3:17 a.m. I remember because I glared at the wall clock when the lights cut out. I don't mean flickered. I mean dimmed, as if someone had turned a dimmer switch. Everything darkened. The shadows lengthened in the corners, and a smell rotting meat and dead flowers perfumed the room. Michael sat up in bed immediately. I jumped. "Hey, you okay?" But his eyes, they weren't glaring. They were open wide, pupils wide, looking over my shoulder into the far corner of the room. Slowly he raised a hand and pointed behind me. I turned. "Nothing." "Michael?" I whispered, shaking. He started muttering. I leaned down to hear, but the words didn't register. Some kind of mumbling said over and over again, something like "it's in the bed. It's under." It never left. And then the screaming started. Not from Michael, from down the hallway. A shrieking scream that echoed down the 5th floor. I flung open the door, screaming, "Hello? Is someone there?" Nothing. No one passed by. No noises. No voices. Only silence. When I got back to 509, Michael was lying back again. But now his eyes were wide open, and he was smiling, no grinning. He looked at me and leaned in close, whispering, "You heard, didn't you?" I backed away. "So what?" "The nurse," he said. "The one in the corner. The one who burned." My stomach dropped. I'd heard the story in training about a nurse who died in the fire that shut down the North Wing. Her name was Clara Thomas. She had gone back into the flames to try to rescue a patient who'd been marked dead in error. Neither made it. Then the lights went out. Black dark. My flashlight was in the med cart. I froze, my heart racing in my chest. The monitors went out. Quiet. Resolution. No power. Then at a distance I heard footsteps. Bare. Soft. Coming towards me. I backed into the wall. The footsteps stopped. Right in front of me. Then cold fingers brushed against my cheek. I screamed and sprinted out of the room, tripping over the force stand in the doorway. I did not let up until I arrived at the 3rd floor main nurse station. They said that I was as white as a ghost. When they went to visit Michael with someone else, he disappeared. Not dead, disappeared. Bed made, wires neatly pulled out. No sign that he was ever there. The hospital did an internal investigation, believing that he had just walked out, but the security cameras saw no one coming or going on the 5th floor that night. Nothing. Like he poofed into being. A week later I quit, but it didn't stop. 1 month later I got a note from one of the night shifts. They found a burn ID badge in room 509 during some renovations. The name? Clara Thomas. They found a patient identification tag molded into the floor tiles. The ID on that tag? Michael Rivera. He was one of the deceased patients in the fire 10 years ago, before he knew me. I still do not know what I saw that night. I do not know if it was a ghost, a hallucination, or maybe something even more evil. But I know that room 509 is not normal. That's something never departed. Something which pretends to be people and waits. If you ever find yourself getting the night shift at the hospital and they instruct you to go visit a patient in the North Wing, don't go. Not by yourself. I've never been superstitious. I believe in science, medicine, facts. That's why I chose to become a nurse. But something that winter of 2019 shook what I thought I knew about what is real. I am Claire Henderson. I work the night shifts at Mercy Hill Hospital in upstate New York, a old building with a shady reputation for reliability, but turned out to be the contrary. We joked each other that it was haunted, but that was only to spice up the tedium of 12-hour days. Or so I had thought. It started on a snowy Tuesday night. I was assigned to Ward the Old Wing. The newer nurses feared being sent there because it was cold and always sounded unusually quiet. Half the rooms were empty, and some didn't even have power. But Ward C still contained some of the long-term patients old, mostly those with no one to go home to. The only patients on the ward that night were Mr. Sullivan, a 92-year-old stroke victim in room 306, and Mrs. Albright, a nonverbal patient with dementia, in room 309. I was the only nurse on duty on the ward that night. No aides, no floaters, me alone. The hallways were unnaturally dark. Some ceiling lights flashed as I passed, sending brief shadows ahead of me that lingered just an extra beat after I'd left them behind. I remember looking at the time. It was 2:17 a.m., exactly when I heard it. A voice, soft, muffled, childlike. It started in room 304, but that room was shut down for years. I knew that because when I first started working at Mercy Hill, I tried to open it. The door was locked in and covered in dust like nobody had touched it for 10 years. However, I went for it. I had thought that maybe a different patient had TV on, but the voice grew louder as I approached. It was humming, a lullaby. I don't know the words to describe how absolutely awful it sounded. Like someone trying to sound innocent, but doing so completely not. It was the kind of song you find in an old horror movie slow off key, just unnatural. I knocked. Hello. I said, my voice a little shaky. Is anyone there? No answer. I pulled out my keys. None of them matched. The lock was not standard. It was something ancient, nearly antique. I turned to go away when I heard it once more. Play with me. This time the voice was directly behind me. I turned. No one. The hallway was vacant. Cold. Silent. I almost ran back to the nurse's station, my pulse racing. I tried to distract myself, focused on reading vitals, documenting medication, doses, pretending I hadn't just heard what I heard. The discomfort didn't stop. At 3:10 a.m., the emergency call light came on. Room 304. That was impossible. The system was old, but not connected to empty rooms. I checked the board twice. Still flashing 304. I grabbed my flashlight and came back. The hallway was colder than ever. My breath blew into the air. I felt something shift in the air, as if pressure released. I reached room 304. The door was open. I promise you it was closed locked years ago. I shone my light into the room. The room was completely empty. No bed, no equipment, nothing but four walls and dust. Except, there were little handprints on the wall. Dozens. Hand-sized. A few of them were smeared like whatever made them had been pulled off. I moved in slowly, waiting for someone to jump out of the darkness. But nobody jumped out. Instead, the door slammed shut behind me. I screamed and ran to it, grasping and heaving it wouldn't budge. My flashlight cut out, and in a moment of blackness, I swear I saw something flash across the ceiling. And then the voice spoke in my ear. You're not supposed to be here. I hammered on the door, shrieked, kicked, and then suddenly it opened, as if nothing whatsoever had happened. I lurched out into the hall, shaking, drenched with sweat. When I wheeled around, the door was closed again, and locked. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even go home. I sat in the break room, rewinding the security monitors again and again. Nothing ever showed up in that hallway. The camera feed for room 304? Static. The next night, I pleaded to be transferred. The charge nurse paused, then spoke quietly and uttered something that I will never forget. That room has been closed off since '86. A kid died in there. Not a patient, a visitor. She wandered in during visiting hours and they discovered her in 304. Told they choked or something. There wasn't even a pillow in the room. I asked why didn't they remove the call button if no one is in the room. She shrugged. It's not even installed. You see a flash? That's impossible. But was. I saw it, heard the voice, felt the presence. In the following weeks, more strange things happened. Patients on Ward C would talk to people who were not there. One old woman begged me not to leave her alone at night, warned me the little girl kept trying to get into her bed. I started documenting the events, even brought a thermometer with me. The corridor outside room 304 was always 15 degrees cooler than the rest of the floor. Always. The rest of the nurses stopped questioning and just avoided that side of the floor. I left Mercy Hill the following spring. but I still get to have that night to dream about. I still hear the lullaby occasionally, especially when it's late at night and I'm by myself. And every time I pass by hospitals, I stick my head through the windows and I wonder what else is lurking in the shadows. So if you ever find yourself trapped working the night shift at an old hospital and you hear a voice where there shouldn't be anyone, don't answer. Don't turn back. And no matter what, never in a room 304.